Now you go back into the athlete type and what those specific types are responding well to based off of the phasic volume. And then you have a better model that you can piece together to guide you to try to minimize the guessing game. We're gonna go into all the stuff around a model of volume. So breaking down what are the current models, weeks, put that phone down, and then what are we gonna do with an actual model moving forward, because we're covering some of the periodization stuff from last week where we were looking at reps and sets. And I wanted to take a little step back and to actually discuss models. What models exist currently? What are the models' downfalls? And then what can we do moving forward? So covering volume in general, we're looking at the classic model is reps times sets, right? Like everybody will sit there and say, okay, how much volume do you have? Well, I'm doing 5 sets of 5. Okay, so you got 25 reps of bench press. And that's sort of the standard. This is really, in my opinion, the only model that's currently being used in the entire sports performance industry. I don't think there's really much else. There's one other model that has been brought up for hypertrophy, but this is essentially it. And I do want to say the stuff that we're going to talk about, you will not read in your textbooks. You didn't learn this in school because no one actually has any comprehension of what volume actually means. So I do really want you to be taking notes, and T, you're the note taker today. So you better be on it, because this shit's not in your CSCS book. Okay, so if we go into this method, taking the number of reps, multiplying it by sets to attain the total number of reps that you're doing in a session, and then you're going to quantify that over a training period. So let's just say a 2-week period or a 4-week period or an 8-week period. What's the total reps that you achieved on bench press? What's the total reps that you achieved on snatch, clean, whatever that might be. So the downside of the classic model is that there's really no clear advancement point. There's no clear definition of when to start to measure. Meaning, do we start at 60%? Do we start at 80%? A lot of old school guys would say, back in the day when I was coming up, oh, you don't start measuring till 80%. And then my high school strength coach, along with my dad, would be, well, you could start probably around 60 or 70%, which we'll get into some of that. So there's really no clear point of measurement, and there's no clear advancement, because things will change as you become a better athlete, as you advance through training in your career. I think volume needs to be more nuanced as you get older, and especially when we're talking about the rep schemes and the umbrella of the rep schemes, looking at high volume rep schemes, transition rep schemes, high intensity rep schemes. So this is really moving backwards, going to help you piece all that stuff together. Does anybody have any questions on the classic model? This is your standard. I'm a exercise phys professor and never trained anyone model. Okay, so this one I would pull from old head, really the first differential model that's not even a model. This you can't even find this on Google. You can't put this into anything and find that this actually exists. I'm writing this as a model that I was exposed to around 08, 09. And it's essentially, you don't start monitoring your volume until you're at 60%. Okay, so you get to 60%, you measure those reps while multiplying the total sets to get the total amount of volume, but it's only if you're over 60%. Okay, if you're under 60%, it's not going to be you won't get anything of value really out of that measurement. Another downfall here, there's no advancement on training age or ability. Okay, there's no substantial differentiation between all reps, meaning if you would look at if somebody's doing a main lift, like a snatch, versus if they're squatting in that session, I think there does need to be some differentiation between that type of volume. So this would be an improvement on the classic model, and this is the first thing that I've ever seen. This is from Anthony Datillo, where he just says start at 60%. He was a weightlifter, powerlifter, strongman. His training partner was one of the strongest guys in the world at the time. He worked a lot with Perry Rader, like all the old school bodybuilders. He was around mainly from the mid 60s through the 80s. And his son's actually like a decent powerlifter right now. I mean, he's older as well, but that would be like that sort of improvement on the classic model. This is the newest model that I've found on volume-based comprehension. And the main issue I have with this is the effective reps model. This is something from what I understand, this is from Chris Beardsley, who's a researcher. He's pretty prominent on social. He's got a book on hypertrophy. It's the effective reps model, and it follows two key concepts, okay? Reps or a set, reps and a set have to be done in that set for that to count towards your effective reps. You have to be within 5 reps of failure. Okay, there must be a slower rate of concentric muscular action, meaning that if you're within 5 reps of failure, you also can see or feel that the reps are getting slower. Okay, this leads to greater high threshold motor unit recruitment. This is essentially like the 2 pillars of the effective reps model. So if we're looking at volume, Beardsley in this case would say this set only counts if you get within 5 reps of failure and you have slower concentric movement as you're getting close to that failure point. So what do I see as a downfall of the effective reps model is that, one, it's mainly just identifying hypertrophy, and this is the model to use for hypertrophy. 2, you have to know RIR. You have to feel and sense RIR. And reps in reserve is what RIR means. And I've seen athletes that could train for 4 or 5 years and they still don't fully comprehend what it takes to really get close to failure. You also have to trust the athlete to comprehend bar speed. So this would be another issue where it's like, if they don't really understand compensatory acceleration, I don't know if they really understand bar speed. And then you also probably would need a velocity-based tracker. And it doesn't clarify. In my research, I have not seen any clarification for non-hypertrophy specific training, meaning I haven't seen, a weightlifter, let's say they're doing 7 doubles and they're not within 5 reps of failure on those doubles for snatch, let's just say. Where's the measurement of an effective reps model for a weightlifter? Where's the effective reps model? I would say someone like Dorian Yates, who was a savage bodybuilder, one of the best ever, might do 2 or 3 sets building into his big, huge set where he would go till death, essentially. But so would we not count Dorian Yates's first 3 to 5 sets building into one set of 30 where he was about to die with forced repetition? So there's a lot of, I think it's a better model than the classic model, but I think there's a lot of questions and thoughts around this in regards to volume. Do you have any questions on the volume models and what I'm even talking about?
The only difference is whether you start at 60 or you don't start at 60 or you have reps in reserve.
Yeah, basically. And the problem I have here too is like, you're working with beginner athletes.
This doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, you're gonna ask, like use Loveland. You're gonna ask Loveland yesterday, like she back squatted 107 for 4. You're gonna ask her like, well, was that within 5 reps of your failure? She has 0 idea, like 0 clue. She's just doing like what I'm yelling at her to do. Like, so that's the downfall. It's like if you're, and I think that's the issue here is that I see none of the models have ever really made that much sense, and the models could be reps times sets, and then they have tonnage as a separate entity, which I'm okay measuring tonnage because that can help you when you're looking at like partial range of motion and that impact on the body. But yeah, the difference is literally either you just measure them all, You start at 60% or you use this. And this is solely hypertrophy based.
Yeah. So you have to also know like your max.
Yeah. I would assume in this case, you don't necessarily need to know a max. You more so would need to know the point of failure on every specific lift and what that feels like, what the movement pattern is happening like. So it's not necessarily, you don't have to in the effective reps model. Now in the Datillo model, you have to have a clue. In the classic model, not necessarily. And a lot of people use like a Datillo version. Well, they'll start at 70% or they'll start at 65, whatever it might be. Weeks.
When would you use this in a sports setting?
When would I use this in a sports setting?
Yeah. When would you use this in a sports setting?
Honestly, I don't think I would. I think this model, unless I'm having like a bodybuilder who's well trained, but even in that case, I think I would try to, and I will say I didn't include in here Brad Schoenfeld's, I wouldn't even call it a model, where he talks about like each group, like so your pecs should get, let's just say 10 sets a week for optimal growth. Your quads need 12 to 15 sets per week based off of research. I think that's not even necessarily a model. It's just something that has been stated from research and looking at mechanical tension over a timeline. But I don't think I wouldn't even argue it's a model, because there's no like rules to follow. And I think that's the thing with this, is it leaves there's a lot of questions here. And so I wouldn't really use it. I think it would be fun for like, you look at a set of bench, like let's say we take the 3-7 method and we just clown around and we put the VBT on it and we see when we die what the bar speed is for like the last 3 reps leading into dying. But is that gonna be beneficial for us long term? Like that's my other issue, is like none of this shit we need to know. None of it. None of this is going to impact if one of you guys is gonna throw 65 meters or 22 meters, none of this. And I think that's the other thing that I always come back to, is like, how does this affect me practically in application? And honestly, even looking back, the only model I think that actually could be effective to a point would be like the Datillo's model. And it's pretty just bare bones. It's not really super precise. I think you do it where you get like, I'll say like, let's say you do drop sets. I guess my only thing is like they would almost prefer no failure in this model, like minimal failures. Whereas
like you're on bench, you can be going fine and then literally die.
Yeah, I think.
Was it like 5 reps before that was like you have to start calling it? Like no, I'm not going to call it there because I'm still going.
Yeah,
this seems dumb.
I think.
Like this seems like it doesn't like any like for a bodybuilder, but even then like a bodybuilder could just be going, and then like sit a second and then like cheat reps, keep going.
Yeah, and then get forced to do 3 or 5 more
reps. Like, well, when does this even matter?
That's the thing I would say, is like I would go within 5 reps of failure.
What if you don't know that? What if mentally you're a bitch?
Well, that's a big part. Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so this is where I'd say this for more advanced athletes makes sense. And probably every set that we're training, we're getting within this 5 reps of failure outside of accessory work. But, like, does that mean that the accessory work is ineffective? No. Like, that's my take. So, like, I think we naturally...
Maybe like a tempo or something. I feel like
maybe. That's where I would say is
use the theory to determine what weight to tell the athlete to put on that.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think like for us personally, and I'm going to get into our model here next, and this is the shit that you won't read in your books, because no one actually spends time thinking through this. This stuff is okay to have as a governor in your head with an athlete. Like, okay, They were within 3, and this is things that I do consistently. That's probably within 3 or 4 reps of failure in my mind based off of how they moved and the position of the bar. Let's just say with bench press, let's put a 10 on each side or let's put a 5 on each side. But again, it doesn't go back to saying that like if they're at 6 reps to failure, was that set ineffective?
That's where I'm thinking.
Yeah.
I think at basic level, you technically want one.
If you're thinking through hypertrophy, yeah.
As efficient as possible.
Yeah.
That's how I think. If each set I only have 1 rep left, I feel like that's as efficient as I could be.
So the argument would be, in that case, you could be negatively impacting. Let's say you have 8 sets like yesterday's squats. Okay, let's say you have 8 sets, but it's 8 sets of 4. Let's say if you are on set 3 and 4 and you're a RIR 1, right? Like you might not get 6, 7, 8. That would be the argument. Now, if you're on RIR 4 and then when you get to 6, you can get 6, 7, 8. You're getting more work done in those 8 sets than you otherwise wouldn't have. Does it really matter? Because my whole thing is I'm going, okay, so I would have a chart for RIR. I'd have to train the athlete on RIR. I'd have to be, like, we'd all have to know, and I think we do have a decent understanding for everybody's RIR. Then we'd have to have the VBT stuff set up on every station, essentially. And also that it would matter to measure a 13, 14, 15, 16-year-old. That's the other thing is, like, I don't think half this shit matters for our population. So I think, like, that's the other factor here as a downfall. I think it's an improvement. It's an attempt to improve, but I think it's missing the boat. There's still a lot of gaps. The large shirt model?
Someone that wears a large shirt is going to explain this to me, and I'm not going to listen to it.
I think that's part of the issue is that, like what DJ was saying is, like, this to me is more so part of a bigger model.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what I think you were saying.
Yeah, like it's like monkey hole.
Yeah.
But not like to the degree that this is stated.
Yeah. And so when I talked to Will Vertel about this, because he did a whole video on this, and I just brought up a whole bunch of questions, and I'm like, what about a guy doing power cleans off of 2 boxes? So you're gonna tell me, like, you're gonna really tell me you do 10 sets of 2, and you're let's say you do 10 sets of 2, but you're 6 RIR, but you're getting a minute rest. That's it. That their traps aren't gonna be hypertrophic over a long period. Let's say they do 20 power cleans from 2 boxes twice a week for 8 straight weeks, and they never get within 5 RIR. They won't have hypertrophy on their traps or their erectors. Like, bull. Absolute crap, dude. I don't buy any of that. Okay, so this is where I want to go into the load model. And again, I want to clarify, most of these models I'm making these up because I'm trying to explain what I've heard people say, but no one out there has actually specified. So to go back, Chris Beardsley has specified this. I didn't make this one up. This is his, like, effective reps for hypertrophy model. So that's good. At least we have a basis of, like, something to pick apart. This model, this was me making it up in the sense that, like, reps, sets, and then you add in the load, which is where the tonnage comes into place. And then you're solely basing your volume off of, is tonnage too high relative to where you've been, or is tonnage too low relative to where you've been at certain phases? So a phase would get assigned a tonnage marker or a load, total work marker, and if it's over that, theoretically you would believe that you're going too far past that, or too far under that, or hitting the sweet spot. And that would be, so. Again, I've never really seen this explained by anyone. I've heard coaches talk about it, but they don't even do that good of a job explaining it because I have I think it's an improvement, but I think there's still a lot of doubts around it. Again, they usually don't discuss when to start tracking. And then where is the advancement, meaning when do you start to add in other exercises that you're tracking, or how many exercises do you track in a session? Do you track everything? Do you even track your V-ups versus, and then does your V-up tracking get quantified the same as your back squat, and does that get quantified the same as a clean at 180? You know, like thinking through that lens. So total tonnage is okay, but I think it can also be deceiving with range of motion as well. So if you have, let's say we're doing the squats from the boxes and you have someone doing 300K, does a 300K, if we would look just at tonnage at total load, does that 300K, even if it's at a partial range of motion, the tonnage would be off the charts relative to when we're doing a full range of motion, but theoretically the full range of motion would likely have way more mechanical tension, but have a lower load, so it can be deceiving. You follow me on this? Taman follows me. You guys follow me? Okay. Legend maybe a little bit. So think about, okay, yesterday you did 200. The worst 200K squats in Legend's life were done yesterday. He just looked like trash, dude. Squatting like trash. I swear I saw you squat like 2 weeks ago and you look good.
Yeah. My back was feeling too good. I don't want to go that low.
Yeah, he was squatting high. Looking like Joel Seedman over there. So meanwhile, he was dying, going submarine style. But using that, okay, so let's say you hit 85 for 8 doubles. Okay, so Sam goes 85 for 8 doubles. I don't know the math, but let's just, let's just say it's 1,000 pounds, whatever. Let's just throw that out there. But let's say he would do 8 doubles at 250 over there, all for the jerk boxes, partial range of motion. Okay, so if you look at the tonnage, that tonnage would be off the charts relative to what you did yesterday. I would likely argue that yesterday's workout will have more of a negative impact on you because you are under tension and you have more range of motion for a longer time frame. That would be my argument. Now, we would also have to see, that's where it would be important to see, like, does that beat you up more than that? Or vice versa? Because then now we're starting to see individual adaptation periods, and this goes back to like the latency aspects of what we were talking about last week. So I think this is a good advancement. I don't think it's the best, okay? So I want to bring in, and I would term this the phasic volume model. Phasic. And this would be based around where the athletes have different volume modeling based on the level of experience and ability. Okay, so at each point, the athlete would sort of have a trigger that could then get them when they get to the next level in training, now the volume gets identified differently. Okay, so the first things, and this is like where I think it's important to recognize that there's nuance in strength and conditioning. And then we've got to take that nuance and recognize how we have these trigger points or how we can advance someone through those different phases so that we can optimize peaking them, developing them over a long time frame, and get every little thing out of that position, okay, out of that individual when we're leading into like a big peak or something along those lines. Okay, so the big things to understand here: 1, we've got to understand sport depths, okay? 2, we've got to understand levels. And then 3, primary focus, secondary focus, and accessory focused. Okay, so I think it's really important that we go through this here and then we can build out on top of that.
Can you define levels?
So levels would be when we would be testing, and I'll get into that right now. So we would go, let's say you're level 1, you're a middle school kid. I think the easiest way to look at it is like level 1 could be middle school, junior varsity. Once they progress from that period, they get to level 2, which would be like high school varsity. Level 2, high school varsity, they progress to level 3. Level 3, and we've talked about this a little bit. We haven't like fully developed all of this, but level 3 could probably have 3 levels in it based off of, is someone a Power 5 athlete versus a D2 athlete versus a D3 athlete, and then we could sort of differentiate there.
You gonna separate Power 5 and double A? Or are you saying it's D1?
I think even that doesn't matter, assigning D1, because I think you would look at the assessments and it would probably be like level 3 A, B, C. And somebody could be in the Division 3 level. Like I'll use the one swimmer I have who's at MIT. She's a Division 3 swimmer, but last year as a true freshman, she was a 7-time All-American as a true freshman. She has the level capability of a Division 1 swimmer, but she's at MIT. So she would be pushed into like level 3A, likely, even though she's a D3 athlete. You follow me?
Yeah, you have to look at the athlete, not whether.
I would argue Roger Steen's a great example. When Roger was a D3 national champ, he was very likely a level A, level 3A. So I think that's where we would have to understand it. Then level 4 would be professional, essentially. Okay. So terms, I almost want to ask you guys, how do you see sport depths, Taman?
How do I see the sport depths?
Mm-hmm.
In terms of what? Like,
How would you define it to somebody? Somebody comes in, they're like, what's sport depth?
it's just like
And you can cheat by using the screen.
just a range of sports grouped together.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really it. Yeah. It's method used to identify characteristics of athletes lumped into groups of sports with similar strength characteristics, and they're assigned assessments based on their sport goals and transfer of training. I think this would be like the textbook explanation that you would see someone eventually using when all of the white coats realize that they have been spending too much time inside of their labs and not enough time training people. Levels would be period of training, age, capability identified through assessments. I sort of want DJ. I'm going to try to get to this next one for DJ because I think I might have screwed up the assessments for the sport we're getting into. So I'll try to hurry this one up. Primary would be either technical coordination or absolute strength. Secondary would be absolute strength or plyometric. Accessory would be hypertrophy work, trunk control work, isolation core work, something like that. So this is like how we need to get familiar with this to fully understand how this model works. Because this is the model that we use. And on top of that, in my opinion of arrogance, there's no other model like this in the entire world. No one has ever talked about this. It does not exist anywhere, and it's probably the most practical. So let's say we take the phasic volume model, and there's going to be three phases to this, and we'll explain each part. Okay, so you get early level of training age. Until the athlete achieves level 2 within their sport depth, the volume is measured by strictly reps-based performance. Jumps, plyometrics aren't even monitored. There's no percentage monitored. So it's literally, this kid comes in and they do a squat, that gets piled into reps. They do a barbell clean, they do a clean with the dowel rod, that's lumped into their reps. An athlete who's beginning to snatch, squat, bench will have all their reps measured and contributed to total volume, regardless of RIR or percentage of maximum. These are kids that are just learning how to walk, essentially. Think about, they're just learning how to move. They're just learning how to squat. They're just learning how to snatch. They're just learning how to bench. It's taking these kids who are all over the place and just developing their neural control so that they can recruit better. So this would be phase 1, and this would be level 1. When they achieve level 2, it ticks and it changes. So the issue with the I think, dominance almost of this volume model is that it's dynamic. It changes with the athlete as the athlete can make better adaptations. And that's one thing that no one really discusses either, is that as our body gets smarter, as we become a better athlete, it adapts differently. It needs either more stimulus, it might need heavier stimulus, it might need faster stimulus, it might need a longer rest period, it might need a lot of different factors, and so we've got to be able to also have a system that's dynamic with it. Okay, so that's so my belief in this case is that the timeline is we've got to look at when we have assessments. Look at Loveland, right? She cleans 75 kilos. She's probably a level 2. The hard part here is and she back squatted 235 for 3 or 4, using her as the example. She's probably a level 2, but she can also probably just benefit still from this because of her age. So I would argue I should be developing a program, monitoring all of that stuff so that we're all on the same page with Loveland and her progress. Her age, we can still probably get away with not doing that. So to answer the question, I would say that how long would it last? How long does it take to get a kid to become varsity style of strength? I'm thinking about Winston, he's a good example where dude was in 7th and 8th grade, hitting big numbers. He was probably level 2 by the end of 8th grade. And it showed. He went out and started varsity. So it was a year and a half, a year, 2 years, something like that. So I think that's the way I see it, is that timeline will be different from athlete to athlete. I also think somebody who starts earlier will be in this. Think about Nick was in level 1 probably till early 8th grade, but then by the end of 8th grade was arguably in level 3. So I think you just got to be aware of where they're at relative to the assessments that we've built predetermined based off of that aspect. So I think when we're talking to parents, this is where the reps come in, and the total amount of time that they would have to be in the gym, the amount of sets and reps that we need them to achieve on a weekly basis to get to their goals. That's where that would factor in. Is that clear? Okay. Anybody? Questions? Weeks?
When you say early level of training age, that could apply for kids up to
You could be
college level.
Yo, Andrew, can you go get Rich and tell him the side door's open that he can come in, please? I do believe that could directly apply to you get, I was sort of thinking about, let's say, this is a weird example. I was thinking about Caitlin's brother. He gets into training, dude's had bad back issues, dude's had issues with obesity, blah, 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 a lot of issues. He'd be level 1 probably for 2 to 3 years. And he's 40. And that's okay. But then we show them the path. Hey, you got to come in the gym 3 days a week and stop eating chips and drinking. And that could expedite the process out of there. So, does that answer? Yeah.
It was more just validating.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that's the big factor here is being dynamic and being capable of looking at somebody no matter what their age is. The age is not necessarily what matters, it's where they're at with their assessment. So phasic volume model, we get into phase 2. Okay, so this is where now phase 2 looks like the athletes made progression in their sport and their training ability, and they've grown into level 2, level 3 of their realm of training. Okay, so think about Now we can see that this athlete is capable of possibly going to the collegiate level to do something. At this point, volumes measured as reps and sets over 60%. And the reason why I believe that that's a decent number to start at is I think right around 60% is typically when people start to flip the switch in their mind of like actually putting forth a little bit more directed effort. I think about it with you guys, even with throwing. This is like the range throw, right? If you're throwing 75%, like you've got much more directed effort to throw that usually. 60 to, I mean, I know 60 is not the same as 75%. I'm just trying to make that same comparison there. So 60% of their 1 rep max or predicted 1 rep max based on assessments. So we might have a 5 rep max back squat and we just use a formula to predict what that would be. So we've just got to be aware that in some cases we might not be maxing them out all the time. But if we have a kid come in and he hits 315 for 5, he's probably benching 350 or squatting 350 around. So we would have that predicted assessment. Jumps are assessed as well with jumps versus hops as a ratio. Okay, so we're looking at main lifts, jumps versus hops. Okay, so for instance, an athlete that squats 100K would have all reps accounted for in their session, over 60 kilos, and any main lifts prior to the squats as well, over 60% of their 1 rep max. So we're measuring primary lift, we're measuring secondary lift, and we have a jumps versus hops ratio.
Level 2 and 3 is the
High school and college.
so you're lumping those together.
Yeah. And full disclosure, I don't necessarily think it matters as much, and a lot of this stuff is related to peak strength and to teams and to how we're going to monitor all this stuff with level 2. I think it's important to start just monitoring it and being aware of, I'm thinking about Brady. Like Brady's was a level 3 when he's in high school, and being aware of like, okay, how many reps and sets is he cleaning? How many reps and sets is he squatting or whatever it might be? And then is he jumping in a week? What do those jumps look like? At the end of the week, what's his average distance thrown? Okay, this helps us set up now. If we pull back on one of these or add on one of these, what happens to his distance or what happens to his performance based off of whatever, our main predictor is. Do you follow me with that?
I do. I see that.
What do you see as the major downfall?
Where do you find the overarching number to decide we need to hit this many sets, we need to hit this many reps?
I think that just comes from compiled research on the athlete. And that's the other thing is I think in most kids, it's most kids in high school just need to just train. They just need to train. But then when they start to separate from the pack, it's okay, well, this kid is getting past the normal high school kid. I need to be a little bit more aware of what we're doing with this stuff. And it's something that I've failed with and struggled with. I think it's something that as a gym we've failed and struggled with. I don't think it's been necessarily detrimental to our performance with our athletes, but I think it could help us improve in the future with our athletes.
So you're essentially just trial and error your way through it and see
Yeah.
all right, this works, then we'll do this during peak.
Dude, use an example of Haley. For Haley's career early on, up till she was 20, we would taper for 2 weeks. And I'd be like, yo, this taper is going to set her up. She's going to rip everything and kill it. And then for a year and a half straight, from the time she was 18 to 20, we'd go into meets and she would just feel flat, nothing. And it wasn't because her weight was off or anything like that, because when you're cutting, your weight can have a negative impact on that. But in her case, I would be looking at all okay, her snatches on a week, her clean and jerks on a week, her squats on a week, her pulls on a week. And then I'd look at it and I'd be like, well, why is, like, we backed off, we're at 60%, she should feel like a machine. And then in Fiji, so she's 19, about to turn 20, I was like, yo, we're gonna taper, and then the last week, we're gonna taper like 15 days out, and then when we get to like the last 6 days, we're gonna go heavy. And like 2 days out, we're hitting like 95K clean and jerk. And she actually went out and goes 5 for 6 and got the world bronze medal and felt better. And so in that case, it was like, okay, the trial was traditional taper. Then the risk was, let's try a heavier taper, I guess or a heavier peak, I guess you could call it. And the interesting part was that I would see it in training. I would see her, like, she'd hit, Ryan is similar to this. Ryan will hit, if he hits like 20 to 25 regularly, and then has like a day or two off from heavy load, that third day he comes back and he's like geared up to smack it because he's so familiar with the movement. So whereas Junior needs like 5 days of not lifting heavy to actually hit some type of big number if he's in the right mindset. So that's where the trial and error comes in. That's where and then that goes back to, now we're gonna go back even deeper, and that's where we're gonna go with this in the future discussions, is now you go back into the athlete type and what those specific types are responding well to based off of the phasic volume. And then you have a better model that you can piece together to guide you to try to minimize the guessing game. What's up, guys? Our podcast and our channel are sponsored by our own strength training app, Peak Strength. The entire focus of Peak Strength is to provide you guys with the absolute best sports performance app that you could ever imagine. We build out the programs on the back end. We take in all of these different decisions that we learned here on site at Garage Strength so that we can then apply it to you so you can improve your training. So if you guys want to improve your overall sports performance, head over to peakstrength.app, the Google Play Store or the Apple iOS Store. Download Peak Strength. You'll get a free week of training, and then you can start getting on those gains, get those reps done so that you can become a champion. Now, let's get back to the video. Peace. You follow me?
Follow you.
Any thoughts?
I'm thinking like, okay, team setting of like football.
Mm-hmm.
How do you start to, I mean, obviously you probably split it by position groups. And
Yeah.
like that, and, you know, workload on the field.
And time of year.
Time of the year. I guess I'm just looking at like, obviously off season, in season training is probably gonna be completely different.
Yeah.
So it's just a lot of back end work.
It's a lot of back end work where it's like you've got to be aware of everything that's going to have a negative, positive, or neutral impact, and then also be aware of how is that person expressing that impact. What is the impact, you know, that you're seeing in training, and then also know if it's an emotional thing or not from something else as well. But it's trying to minimize the variance of like just randomness. Like if we can clarify what happens at each growth point for the athlete, and then what we're measuring, and then what we pull back on. Is it the hops? Is it the jumps? Is it the squats? Like you might have an athlete who can go full throttle snatches. They can only do 2 sets of a squat, and they can go full throttle jumps. And now you have a puzzle piece that fits together for that person's peak. Depending on their athlete typing, and then depending upon are they explosive athletes or are they weak athletes? Dude, some of this stuff, I'm like, I was like laying it out and like thoroughly going through past experiences, I think a lot of this is stuff I missed with Jake. And it's like, with Jake, I would go traditional model, then I would go the Haley model, and then I'd come back and I'd be like, all right, on Monday we'll go really heavy, then Tuesday, Wednesday we'll go light, Thursday he'll do mobility, then we'll go heavy again on Friday. And I could never seem to find the right pieces to put at the right time, and I think it was because I didn't have it all built out. Now, Jake still had a good career. Like, he's a multiple-time world team member. Like, you know, it didn't absolutely throttle him, but maybe it's a difference of him going 145 and 175 instead of 68 or whatever he hit, 67. Now this would be the phase 3. Okay, so phase 3, the athlete has they have progression into level 4 and of their training, and now we'll have all aspects of their training volumized, meaning, I sort of like that, volumized. This includes primary lift, secondary lift, jumps and hops, and the accessories. So on the previous phase, I was not measuring accessories. I was basically looking at that like, okay, these guys can still, it's mainly based off of what's their primary, secondary, and their hop ratios. So this one, we're adding in accessories. So in this case, an athlete will measure any volume over 60% of their 1RM, okay, in their training session on a clean, a snatch, or a variant, whatever we're using, even if we're doing trap bar jumps, a squat or a press, and they're going to measure their hypertrophy, their DTC work, or their core exercise. And then the volume will also be measured on jumps as a ratio of hops to jumps. And I do need to just clarify that because on the previous one I had it jumps to hops. So we need to clarify that ratio as hops to jumps, because the hops, in my opinion, should almost always take up 75% of the jump session versus the jumps, because the jumps are typically more intensive. Okay? Is this clear? Weeks?
75%.
Huh?
Hops to jumps ratio is roughly
75%. And I noticed this,
everybody.
I think, as the baseline, yes. So that's the other thing, is I think that what we see, the phasic volume model is establishing baseline starting points for each area. Think technical coordination, absolute strength, accessory work, jump work. Okay? So you're going to get baselines that we can start at. Those are the levers that then you're going to be able to pull on. And it's based off of where the athlete is in their career. So are they level 1, they level 2, 3, or they level 4? And then relative to the sport assessments, like that helps us really dial in where this athlete's at and how we can do a better job peaking them as well as possible. I also noticed this with jumps with the athlete day, is that jumping rope is a hop. Hurdle hops are a jump. That's like meta, I guess, maybe in some way. Maybe it's not, I don't know. But I thought that was funny. Nobody else thinks it's funny, but I do. Taman, thoughts?
I mean, just the phasic model is the GS models.
Yeah,
You're
yeah.
just calling it phasic.
Yeah.
It does sound close to triphasic, just saying. Like, triphasic.
Well, maybe we can change it to the level volume model, but I didn't like that one.
Level volume model.
I just like looking at,
Cool. But so you're just saying you just use this, you're establishing baselines with strength numbers and stuff. Use levels and based on the levels and use sports assessments, so essentially testing,
yeah,
to establish how much volume certain athletes get.
yeah. And then we can look at it and be like, okay, primary, let's just say there's this TC, and you see, let's just say 5 doubles measured over 60, 10 reps. Then you come down, okay, 5 sets of 5, 25 over 60. Then you look at accessories on that day as well, 3 sets of 17. Or, whatever that might, what is that, 56 or something? 50 or 51, maybe. But we would add that in, and then we can see on a weekly basis how everybody's adapting. and then you also incorporate the athlete day. Now, the discussion that I've been having internally is like, when does this, how do we bring in actually monitoring load? I think that is the next piece, but this is like the foundation to everything currently. And essentially what I'm looking at is I'm trying to figure out, like, when you look at the classic model, it's not, in my opinion, it's worthless. If I use a classic model, it genuinely is not helping me at all because I have no concept of where the athlete is. And if I'm looking at the model, even like the Tillo's model, there's some, like, where's the percentage for a jump? You know, so that's like the thing, is like, how can we have some practicality that puts us it establishes where this athlete is in their career and where they are in their training block. That's what we need for them to make progress. And the thing is like, using you, we've had discussions of this, of like, okay, well, I want to lift heavier. I don't want to do that taper. And then you know, we've done that. And sometimes you've competed really well. And then sometimes you go to US Indoors and throw 1938. 43. So it's like, all right, then we can look at performances and back up and be like, all right, when we did X, this happened. When we did this, this happened. And it provides some type of directive, just a little bit more than we currently have, because we're flying by the seat of our pants. Every strength coach is literally operating off of a worthless model that provides zero internal perspective on their athlete's state.
So the classic sets and reps, you're saying, is worthless because it doesn't track the true nitty gritty of every part of, not phase, primary, secondary, accessory. What do you call those three things? That's another side question.
So you're saying, you're asking, what am I calling?
You have sport depth, you have levels, then you have PSA.
Okay.
PSA.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, we could call it PSA. We could.
But so the
Okay, so you're
disregards all those
exercise classification is currently in the classic model. Everything is created equal essentially. And for me, these are the two things, and I wanted you to write this down, is that my goal is to assign, so one thing I've thought about doing is like, you know, a technical movement would get 2 points. A strength movement would get 1.5 points. Jumps, honestly, would probably get 1 to 1.5 points. Accessories would get a 0.5 point. Okay, so I have talked about this a little bit in the past, and that is the model that would then, and that's going to be based off of how long it takes for traditional recovery from that stimulus. And then we would look at speed work, and we'd look at endurance work as well, and say, okay, these get, and endurance would probably be a much lower rating because it would just be, it would depend on where the athlete is, but it's easier to recover from on a consistent basis if they're trained in it. If they're not trained in it, they're going to get thrashed. But once an athlete is into an endurance system, the volume in general, they can recover fairly well from. Sprinting, on the other hand, it depends on what is the modality. Are we looking at starts? Honestly, I think people can recover fairly well from starts, even though it is a very high threshold directive. I think they can handle that. Max velocity work is a little bit harder. Change of direction is probably in the middle. So then we assign each, if you go back and you think back to speed is change of direction, start and acceleration, and max velocity. Now we have 3 attributes that we assign for volume. Endurance is LSD, threshold, and VO2 max work. Now we have 3 numbers that we assign to those each thing. We have 1 number to each thing, and that impacts the volume. For resistance-based work, it's going to be technical coordination. It's going to be max strength. It's going to be accessories and jumps. So we have 4 there. Explosive work, I would piece that in with the resistance stuff, with the strength stuff. You follow me? No one else is doing this. No one else has thought about this. No one else has implemented this, and it's got to be like, this is how we can move forward to, because I do look at it this way. We set your peak up last year. Maybe you throw 21:10, and now all of a sudden you're in the final and other guy's not there. You know, and maybe, and this is, you know, Sam bangs up his pec. Maybe we could see that ahead of time. Maybe not, but like it's that thought process of like squeezing a little bit more out of you because we're freaking looking at every single thing. And then it also makes it easier for us as strength coaches who we don't like fully comprehend the endurance world, like unless we're in it. Well, now we can have a better understanding of how endurance plays. Sprint, the speed work. Now we have a better understanding of where that speed work impact is. Okay? So I wanted to go through an example. If we would look at phase 1 of volume monitoring, and I know I added some of this stuff. This is what I wanted DJ in on, but do you guys know this?
We've been like creating.
Okay, good. And that's where I think all of you can play a huge role in this, is like looking at speed stuff. What's each sport depth speed level, and what's the levels assigned? You know, what's the explosive levels assigned for sport depth 1 versus 3 versus 5? You know, stuff like that. What's the strength levels? So in this case, we got Lil Lincoln's a running back. He's a phase 1. He's in phase 1 of the volume monitoring. He's sport depth 2. Okay, he's middle school to JV, meaning he could, you know, plays middle school or he could play JV. In this case, the assessment of a level 1 would be kid cleans 135 pounds, 60 kilos about. Okay, he's single leg squatting 135 for 5 on each leg, bench presses 145, squats 165, maybe a little more. Vertical jumps probably 26 inches. If they have some athleticism, that would likely be where they're at. They're running like a 4.95 shuttle, maybe a 5-second 40. Middle school kid. Pretty, like not bad athlete, pretty solid. Because they train with us. They're benching 3 days a week.
165 bench, you clean 135.
That's like,
there's no way you're verting 26 inches
with
those clean and single leg numbers.
I don't know. Yeah, I don't know if that's accurate.
That's not a lot of weight to put.
That's the thing. Like so maybe this bench could be a little lower, 115, 125. But think about a kid in middle school, 7th grade, 8th grade. That's like a normal. Okay, so maybe we raise this to like 185, but I don't think most level 1s are squatting 185. That's grass. Come on. I know you let them go to that legend squat over there, but I don't know. I think, yo, that's funny. I think that, okay, bench, we can lower that. For the most part, this is a normal level 1 kid. Come on.
Sure.
Thoughts?
On the numbers themselves, the assessment numbers?
Yeah.
I just told you the bench is way like.
So put that in the notes. So we take this, and if they're in phase 1, what are we monitoring?
Why are they doing so many bench reps?
We don't know if they're doing bench reps. How do we know? What are we
They
measuring?
do clap push-ups every day.
Yeah. That's,
We know.
you know, it's funny. Yesterday, somebody asked me in the AMA, how many times a week do you bench? And I said, dude, to this day, if I have a kid who's training 4 times a week, we're benching twice a week, and they're doing at least 6 pressing exercises. I'm like, that's it, dude. I'm sorry.
Military, incline, flat, decline. Let's go back.
Yeah. So what are we measuring here? Just the reps. Just reps. That's it. They could be warming up with a bar and it doesn't matter. We're measuring it. We're okay, they're going to have 70 reps of bench because we're measuring everything that they're doing. They do a push-up, it's measured. They do a back squat, body weight, it's measured. And I would look at it like, even in the realm of, because I do want to go back into like, what's the model of periodization and what are other models and how do we differ? I think that's like some stuff I think we just need to cover. And that's the thing here is like, this is essentially like straight, like linear. We're just throwing reps on these kids. We're getting them into training, and we think it takes about 1.5 years for them to go from here to level 2. So if you get a kid, and that's the other thing, when we have somebody come in the door, think about that new kid from BC, let's say, that kid's pretty athletic though. How is he under the bar? I don't know. Okay, so like a kid like him, it's like, yo, is he in 8th or 9th? I think he's in 8th.
Yeah, whatever grade they are.
Let's say he's in 8th grade. Look, we got about 1 year to get that kid to like midway through level 2. Because then he'll probably start or at least contribute to the team. So like that, then it's like, okay, how do we do that? All right, well, we got to get him out of level 1 quickly. He probably will be out pretty quickly. But then let's pretend that this kid came in 2 years ago. If he came in when he was in 6th grade, where he's at right now in 8th grade, he probably would have gotten to midway through 7th grade. So his parents basically shackled him by like 1 year. So really his parents are just horrible human beings and they're ruining him.
So essentially, let me take Legend's point. Legend, these little kids that are like 6th grade on fucking bench, dumbbell bench, they do 10 by 10 on dumbbell bench to like expedite because they're behind.
Yeah.
I mean, they're in 6th grade. I don't know if that's considered behind, but they're like behind.
Well, they'll get ahead. They'll get ahead
They'll
relative.
get ahead faster. So like, and that's 100 reps.
Yeah.
Do it twice a week.
Well, I also think there's a point here where it's,
What is
you've got to be aware of the load a little bit with kids, where it's like, if they're just constantly,
No, they do it right though.
if they're doing it right, I would say probably it's like around 70 reps on the bench in the session. Yeah. And then a back squat, you would probably be looking at like 35 to 45. The clean or the snatch, you would be looking around 20 to 25 on that. I would probably go a little higher on clean or snatch to get rhythm and stuff. Yeah. Yeah. Like I think about with Loveland, it was like, dude, it took us 3 months of just doing, like we would do a lot of reps with the bar. And then she would work up, and then we got back down, and she does a lot of triples back lighter. So, yeah. Now, phase 2, okay, so now phase 2, little Johnny / Lincoln is now, they're at the high school level or they're at the collegiate level. So what are we measuring?
Volume, anything over 60% of 1 RM.
And we're measuring
Jumps versus hops. Hops versus jumps.
hops versus jumps ratio and primary and secondary. Primary equals technical coordination, explosive movement, that's loaded. Secondary equals absolute strength. So Taman's got to assign me to determine the rep ratio or rep formula that we're going to create for the ratio of hops versus jumps, the strength movements, the technical coordination movements, the speed exercises, and the endurance exercises.
Wait,
You follow me?
go back. So you got to determine rep ratio for hop versus jumps.
Well, that's easy. The ratio is 3 to 1.
Okay. And then
Or is it 4 to 1?
you said 75%.
Yeah. That's what I thought. That was
then
that's a question for Caitlin. So if we take the number, let's say you do 8 doubles of clean, in my opinion, there should be a number associated with the primary movement pattern. Then we do 8 doubles back squat to keep things the same. There should be a number associated with back squat reps. It's like taking it a little bit further because I think that then we can value certain reps over the other and also recognize that one will take longer to recover than the other. But level 2 here for phase 2, level 2 and 3 is, okay, we got this kid would be back squat or single leg squatting 250 for a triple. Or if he's level 3, 330 for a triple. Honestly, I think in my mind, I'm thinking about someone like Cooper. You know, single leg squat, 330 for a triple. Next day he gets an offer from Syracuse. I'm sort of making that up except for the offer's real and the weight's real. The timing maybe. Bench press, you go from 275 to 350. Okay, kid's a collegiate running back and he's a level 3. He's probably close to that. Back squat, 345 to 405 plus. I think that could be a little bit higher. Clean, 275 to 315. Vertical jump, 32 inches up to 32. Shuttles, a 455 down to a 43. 40 would be a 48 for a kid in high school, down to a 465, probably maybe a little quicker there. You know, thinking about if you have a kid who's D2 kid, that would be a good number, I think. Kid in high school running a 4.8. I was thinking back to last year's combine. I think there was like 3 kids that were running good 4.8 or lower that were running backs. Is that clear there? So you see these numbers and you're like, okay, this kid's a level 2. Okay, this is what we're monitoring. Uh-oh. I screwed that up. I got to fix that. Okay, so phase 3. So phase 3 of volume monitoring, sport depth 2, they're in level 4. Nick Singleton. Single leg squat, 350 for a triple or heavier. Bench presses, 375 or heavier. Back squats, 485 or heavier. Cleans, 350 or heavier. Verticals, 35 inches or higher. Shuttles, 415. That's fast, but we're talking about a level 4. 40-yard dash, 4.4. It's fast. We're talking about a level 4. Someone who's a professional athlete. So these numbers are high for a reason. But now we're measuring, in this case, their primary, their secondary, their hypertrophy or DTC or core work, their hops to jumps ratio, and then speed stuff as well. Now, the other thing here is that when, and maybe try to bear with me on this, is that we know what we're measuring, okay? So that's quantifying their training. Then the next thing is that in their program, so with you guys, the program's easy. Are you hitting the ranges or are you hitting the distances on Fridays within a percentage? Okay? Sam's hurt and he still is executing his pattern better than you. Now we take, so we can look at, it's a very easy KPI. How far are you throwing, or are we in a phase where it's like, let's just hit the ranges? Like that's what we are looking at for you guys. For a football player, that might look like, can we do a weekly vert test? Can we get a basis of their shuttle, something like that? Like on a training day, let's try to just pick 1 or 2 things on training days to use as the main KPI for that athlete. You know, for a lineman, it might be the vert. For a running back, it might be a shuttle. And then you use that, and you can compare the quantified training to the KPI. What does it do? It's positive or negative or neutral. And then that helps you lead them into a peak. Is that clear?
You're just, this is all the things of like podcasts that we listen to, like coaches that talk about like just getting numbers of everything, but they do like lame ass exercises.
And they don't piece it together.
No, but you're
That's the whole thing here is like, when we're looking at all of this stuff, and especially if you think about with throwing, you think about, like to me with the 40, what if we piece this together and last year Taiji runs, now I still don't believe he ran a 4.78 or whatever it was, and he also ran a fucking 40 degrees in the morning. But let's say we piece it all together and Taiji goes out and runs a 4.6. That's a whole nother world. He runs a 4.6 and dude, he at least enters camp. And that's the things that we have to think about is like, if we do this and Sam's getting older and we can figure out all this stuff and apply it to Sam in his case, and Sam goes 66.50 versus 65.20, that's a team. That's a difference of a team. You know, and I think that's the big factor is that we've got to identify, we got to quantify, we got to attach the quantification to the KPI that's in process. So we have a big picture of where the athlete is, and then we also have where the athlete is in the micro as well, in the weekly basis. So it's an actual volume. This is the big factor here, is the phasic volume model is an actual real model applied that has never been discussed, it's never existed, it's never been identified or quantified, and now it's happening. What? Oh, get out of here. Okay, so an example workout, I wanted to go over this, would be snatch 5 triples all over 70 kilos if we're looking at 100K snatch max. And I know these are the same, but just, so if we see this workout, okay, look at this workout. Just remember this. Snatch, squat, depth drop to bounce. So they're in a contrast. What phase would they be in if they're doing a contrast? Usually. Comprehension or ascension. This would be a transition rep scheme. The contrast method.
Oh, the method. Okay.
Yeah.
What? 5x5 basic as shit.
It is. I would probably even make that like doubles or triples. But I wanted, just for the point here, lunges, Cossack squats, hanging leg raises. Okay? Just go with the drill. If you follow the drill, you'll see where I'm going. God. Also, if we're posting this on YouTube, people need to see like a basic, this is like the, what did I say last week? This is like a pumpkin spice garage strength workout right here. As basic as it comes. And do people see this and they're, what? Snatch 5 triples? That's what I was saying to Jeff though. I'm like, dude, you throw 19 plus and you can barely snatch 85 kilos. Dude, you got your snatch to 120 or back squat to freaking 250. And now all of a sudden he's going to be throwing 20 plus. It's crazy, dude. Shit's simple. Okay, so we go through this. Okay. So let's go this, okay? We're looking at phase 1, and actually, freaking A, did I screw this up? Let me see, I might have screwed this up when I was doing the math. I did. Okay, so actually, in a phase 1, I ruined this. Phase 1, we would basically, oh no, I did do this right. Because in a phase 1, we would be counting snatch and back squat. That would be it, okay? I wouldn't count jumps, I wouldn't count accessories, I wouldn't count DTC work in phase 1. Phase 1, I'm just counting the main and the secondary. You follow me on that one?
Wait, phase 1 is just level 1.
Yes.
2 is level
Is 2 and 3.
3
Is 4. Yes. That is a confusing aspect, but it makes sense when you think through it. Okay, so here we're looking at 15 reps, 25 reps. Even if this number doesn't exist, even if this number is lower, they're doing 15 reps and they're doing 25 reps.
But you're supposed to count all of, like,
I wouldn't count all of these.
bar reps, like all that stuff, right?
I didn't include that in the example workout. If I put that in the example workout, then we would also count all that. So let's say theoretically, for Taman's point, because he does make a point here, I didn't include that. So that would have made this drill a better, more effective drill. But let's say there's 3 sets of 3. That'd be 9 more reps for warm-ups. Let's say there's 2 to 3 sets of warm-ups here. Let's say 3 sets of 3 here. We got 18 more reps. If there's a warm-up. I didn't put a warm-up on the example workout.
We're just making sure, like.
Yeah. You are correct on that. Now
you just count over 60% what you're counting.
Which is where these numbers came in on the drill.
1A, 2A, 3A, 3B, 4A.
Yes. So now you get on 1A, 2A, okay? So we're counting, what are we counting on phase 2?
Over 60% primary, secondary, and accessories. No, just primary and secondary.
And the jumps.
But in this scenario, we wouldn't count this because that's a jump. We do count the jump.
I would count all 1A, 2A, 2B. But not count accessories.
Yeah, I see.
You see? So through here.
Now you're going to connect these phases to the phases. These are phases. You connect them to the ascension or summit phase.
Yeah, whatever. Correct. And dude, also, you guys want me to change terminology to make it easier? I'm all ears.
Because yeah,
I'm just trying to show the model and what the model is. Because like here, it's like, we don't measure this in phase 2.
No.
But we're measuring snatch over 60%. That's why I made it 70 kilos. We're measuring all squats over 80 kilos. And we're measuring jumps. 1 and 1. We're measuring both. We're measuring all this. So yeah, that's where that comes in. Also, like this is, it's not easy. It's complex. It's a freaking moving model. So there's a lot of shit in here. But it's also one of those things that once you start to think about it, you're like, oh, yeah.
I think when I just read it quickly, it was like phase. Then if you took it back to the description, it was like there's obviously periodization phases, and then there's these phases.
The volume phase. So maybe.
Phasic volume model.
Okay, so Taman is voting for a name change on that. Okay, now if we get into phase 3, okay, for the volume model, phase 3, volume model. Here, what are we measuring? Everything. So now you're looking at, this is the number of reps. The next goal, again, is this is the big step forward from here, is then coming back and assigning what is the multiplier, the volume multiplier. That's what I could call it, which is this impact versus this impact. Do you follow me? So like this is.
How that's going to affect recovery?
Yeah.
So like the difference. Full range back squat.
Yeah, exactly. Versus that, yeah.
2 box clean.
Yeah.
Full clean.
And does that impact? Because to me, this rep, this isn't the Electoral College where we got freaking. Actually, maybe sadly it's closer to the Electoral College. I just watch something where they go, a vote in Wyoming is worth. No, a vote in California is worth 3 votes in Wyoming, based off the Electoral College. That's how stupid it is. And my argument where I'm connecting this is this rep doesn't equal this rep. I think that is also a factor we need to iron out and clarify. So if this is 51 reps, this 51 reps is not going to impact me like this 51 reps. There needs to be some type of multiplier. Because it's the same thing as what we talked about. Start work will not impact me the same way that max velocity work impacts me. And there's no differentiation on that.
That is true.
So it's like that's where this is going and flowing. But this is like the start, the foundation. And then it's like, okay, now what's the next thing? Okay, we got to add in the multiplier. Okay, now after the multiplier, now we assign, basic numbers in the phase volume model to phases of periodization, to sport depths. So it's like this crazy flow chart, but it has to be done if you want to squeeze everything out. If you don't want to do it, that's too nuanced. Okay, you don't do it, we'll beat your ass. I'm fine with you not doing it and you want to argue it. Now, I also think there's things we need to clarify and improve, like the name, possibly.
So you're saying this is going to be as detailed as so you have depth drop to bound. The depth drops would have a higher percentage of intensity compared to just a regular broad jump.
Yeah.
Because of the depth drop component.
Well, unless the broad jump is a double, then I would be like, because then you're looking at direct reps. Then you're looking at, in my opinion, a depth drop to a bound would be measured the same as broad jump, or depth drop to bound would be the same as bound. Yeah. Depth.
Not a regular. That's what I'm saying.
Like a single leg bound?
I'm just clarifying, the depth drop is higher than just regular bound.
Yeah, but if you do a depth drop into a bound, that would be 2 reps. If you do 1 bound, that's 1 rep. But I believe the second bound, you would...
So the depth drop itself is added into the volume.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Now, this just goes back to these movements and these reps do not impact me the same as these reps. The tension is totally, is much more drastic here. Like if I said I'm going to do, let's say, 30 reps of Cossack squats at body weight versus 30 reps almost of back squat at 200 kilos, the tension is drastically higher on the back squat. And that's where it's then taking the mechanical tension aspect of the effective reps model and then factoring that into this. And in my initial thought process, I would probably assign 1.5, 1.5, 1.5, half here to start to quantify the training. I might go 1.5, 1, something like that. Yeah, the scale of it. No, it'd probably be.
The multiplier.
Yeah, the multiplier would probably be up to 2. I would say 2 would be where I would put a max velocity.
Okay, so 1.5, 1.
Yeah. I would put max velocity as 2, and I would probably put probably VO2 max stuff up there. So then that way what we can see is in the realm of endurance, if you're doing a VO2 max session in the morning, which means my heart rate's going 90% plus, I'm going full throttle through the roof. The next 2 to 3 sessions will very likely be long, slow distance work because it's more of a recovery. Then, then this is if we're not in the double threshold. If we're in double threshold, then we would do a VO2 max session in the morning, a VO2 max session in the afternoon, and then 4 to 5 sessions of LSD work. But the VO2 max number is higher, so we see the multiplier can then trigger us with the program. And it's the same concept with max velocity. If we do max velocity work on a Monday, and then multiplier is there as a 2, it then triggers us that the next 2 days we should have a lower number programmed in there. Does that make sense? Dude, it's not an easy thing, but also I think that's why it's never been developed. It's complex, there's a lot of nuance, there's a lot of positions that we've got to analyze, and we've got to be able to piece it together, and then we have to use this to inform our tool, our software, to also be able to recognize and comprehend all this. And at the same time, we've got to be on the same page too. So if that's where moving forward, I want feedback on multipliers, discussions, maybe the name. I see the argument with the name. I see from, I don't care about the triphasic part, but I do see it in relation to periodization.
Yeah, because that was like phase 3, and that makes me think like
Comprehension phase. Or, I mean, that's what I was thinking. Yeah, well, yeah, that's fair. I meant in the sense, like, I see what you're saying. So maybe we could change that to something that makes it more levels-based, or dynamic volume model might be a better aspect. But my whole goal then here was to go, so I want to, let's finish with this. If you guys have any questions, I wanted to just go back and remind and go through here quickly where it's like, okay, so now we can take the other thing I wanted to do, not today, but is take then, the classic rep schemes are essentially what we're using when we have a level 1 who is in phase 1, right? We're never really going to go super, we're not going to have some kid who's a 7th grader do myo reps. Maybe for fun, like if we want to torture them, but like probably not. But then that's the other thing here is like, then we can start to tie rep schemes to that stuff as well, to really build out everything that's all encompassing. And then we would get to this part is where I wanted to go today, but I want to stop off of that because I think we can get into this next week and build out more of the rep schemes, but I also think we need to clarify some more of the modeling of the periodization too. So that won't be as in detailed. Any questions? Because we got to work on the multiplier, the name, and all that stuff. It's confusing, but listen, it's confusing, but all the bullshit you watch on Instagram, they think they have this. They don't have it. They don't have any of this thought process laid out.
I have a couple questions. When talking about the plyometrics part, before I was working on like a volume minimum maximum chart.
yeah.
And got me to thinking, okay, so for this, is there gonna be like a okay, this is the minimum you gotta hit to get benefit, and is there a maximum when looking at all of the pieces together?
Yes.
Because obviously, like with the different athlete, the sport depths,
Yeah.
each one they're gonna be
They're gonna
different
be
variables, but like there's gotta be some sort of maximum and minimum to like the plyometrics.
There's a point of diminishing returns, and then there's a point of not enough stimulus.
Exactly.
Yeah, 100%. Yes. And I think that's a great tool to have. The whole goal is that we could sit there and have like the jump sheet, the sprint sheet, the sport depth we understand, the leveling, the assessments. You got all these things laid out ahead of time, and it's just like, boom, I know exactly where this dude is. And then we go, and then you have that multiplier assigned to the aspects, and then it's like, oh, now we can look at when he's peaking. When we decrease the secondary, this happens. Or when we decrease the primary, this happens. Now you can start to see in training, and it just makes it clear to peak. There's still the mentality aspect, the mental aspect of a peak. There's still the mental aspect of a performance that is hard to quantify. And that's the unknown. But like, if we can take care of as much of the other stuff as possible, we'll be in a better situation.
There's always going to be
Yeah. Taman or Weeks. I wanted to go, I know I just cut you off, but this just came up in my mind. It's like, I can look at wrestling and say, the other thing is a multiplier to the sport, because we don't ever think about that. We think about the sports don't exist in our mind. We're like, no, that's just whatever's in the gym. But now I can take a swimmer and assign a multiplier to the swimmer who's doing X amount of meters in the pool, or a wrestler who's doing X amount of live wrestling and live drilling, and now I can see that impact in their training and then rearrange the training around that with the thought process related to what their actual main movements are in the gym. So that's where it's like, and then using a jump mat for the wrestlers once a week is great. Using a 7-minute test on the assault bike, another test. Okay, that's easy. It's just nuance, but we've got to recognize the nuances and engage them, not run from them and pretend they don't live there.
So teams are using the catapults and all this like force plays for jumps or readiness, things like that, to get data, and then taking that, applying it to the sports practice, seeing what they get from there, and then reapplying it.
I don't know how they're applying it, because when they say that, but I don't know how they're actually using that information to designate or change their practice.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Okay, so say you just get the data from practice then. And you say, okay, well, this was a high intensity day at practice.
Yeah.
Lots of running.
2 days, the next 2 days we're going easier.
We're going easier, and then vice versa, like it's easy day, okay, we go harder.
Yeah.
Based on the opponent you have.
Yeah.
And this is kind of
That
thinking of
version.
that model, but with the strength training itself.
100%, yes.
But sometimes, like, that stuff doesn't identify exactly, like, okay, you could say in a practice they ran so much, but that doesn't necessarily mean they can't hit a threshold in, like, a technical coordination movement.
Yeah.
I think that's, like, where the detail comes in.
Yeah. All right. That's our homework.
Peace.